Welcome, and this is Business Now right here on Zodiac. My name is Banda. Coming up in the next half hour or so, Press Corporation Chief Executive Officer Dr. Ronald Mangani suggests for a need of a private sector-led economy. Also coming up in this edition of Business Now, the African Development Bank speaks on climate financing and insurance against climatic shocks in the agriculture sector. We have these stories and many more. Please do stick around. Now, let's begin our program. Press Corporation Chief Executive Officer Ronald Mangani has made a suggestion for a private sector-led economy as a best way to stimulate and sustain the country's economic growth. Mangani, a former Secretary to Treasury himself, gave a keynote address at the first ever CEO Roundtable in Banda. He, among other issues, touched on the need for a strong collaboration between the private and the public sector. We hear more from him.
Both the private sector and the public sector have distinct and important roles to play in order to move this economy forward. That each has to handhold the other in order to ensure that there is no space that is being left unattended to in moving this economy forward. I talked about the importance of recognizing that division of labor will be critical, that there will be elements in the economy that can best be delivered by the private sector, but there will also be elements in this economy that will best be delivered by the public sector. That we still need to recognize the private sector as the engine for growth, but at the same time, the public sector must provide the wheels upon which that engine will actually propel this economy forward. So it is really a question of ensuring that there is collaboration, effective and profitable and meaningful collaboration between the private sector and the public sector in addressing the key constraints that we face as an economy. I actually talked about the importance of governance, accountability, transparency, in ensuring that if each one of these two sectors plays their role effectively. And I also recognize the fact that while we talk about lapses in governance in the public sector, there are also significant lapses in governance in the private sector, especially also recognizing that it is not possible for the public sector to be involved in mischief without collaborating with the private sector in that regard. And therefore it is very important for us to recognize the importance of ensuring that creating a level playing field for the private sector requires that we should address the challenges that we face in the space of corruption and fraud. In terms of the state of development at which we are as a country, the importance of ensuring that the agricultural sector performs very well cannot be overemphasized. In the literature, you have evidence of the fact that economies that have actually been able to move forward, when they are coming from a background such as the one that we are in, start from improving the performance of the agricultural sector, so that industrialization should be agricultural-led in the sense that agriculture should provide the initial raw materials into agro-processing before the country moves forward to other higher levels of processing. Unfortunately, the fact that the agricultural sector in this country is incapable of even meeting its food requirements, national food requirements, is extremely unfortunate. But I must say that the government drive towards addressing the challenges that we face in this sector are commendable. We are now talking about mega farms. There was a time when we were talking about aqua farms. And I think that generally you can see significant progress being made towards ensuring that we address the constraints that we face in this sector. And I'm hoping that the private sector, both in the agricultural sector as a primary activity and in agro-processing, will eventually pick up the trend to ensure that significant agro-processing and value addition is actually taking place in the country, so that we do not just export raw materials, but we also export processed agricultural products.
Well, George Damison is the chairperson for the CEO Roundtable Malawi chapter, and he's making suggestions that if supported, the private sector can address some of these forex shortages, the acute forex shortages in the country.
The forex issue is a simple one. It's a balance of trade issue. We are importing more than we are exporting, so there's no other way to solve this problem apart from making sure that we reduce our import bill and we increase our exports. How do we increase our exports? We increase our exports by making sure that Malawian products are competitive enough for the international market, which I believe they already are. But like I said, I think from a government point of view, we need to make sure that we have enough incentives to the private sector so that they don't feel hamstrung when they want to export their products outside. We also need to make sure that we are fully utilizing the trade attaches in our embassies abroad. Their role is to market brand Malawi. So I think there are a number of things that can be done both from a private sector point of view and from the public sector point of view to make sure that we harness these efforts. I think Malawi is blessed with a lot of human capital. People know what needs to be done. And I believe that the fundamentals to make sure that we correct this situation are in place already. We just need to make sure that we are all putting our heads together. But to answer your question, we need to make sure that our balance of trade is balancing. There is need to relook at some of the taxation policies because I think that's suffocating a lot of upcoming businesses. You might be aware as members of the media that some companies are even retrenching people in this economic environment simply because they have to balance between survival and making sure that they still pay their fair share of taxes. So that's one area. Secondly, we need to maybe relax the bureaucracy that exists when it comes to approvals or certifying products. I'm not saying that we should cut corners in terms of the quality of the products that we produce, but I think the processes can be a bit faster. They can be more decentralized. We're just in the meeting right now where someone was highlighting that for you to have a certificate to import certain products, even if you're in Lilongwe, you have to drive all the way so that you go to Vumbwe Research Station for you to go and get a certificate. So I think things like that are some of the things we can eliminate to make sure that we improve the environment.
Well, also taking her turn is Economics Association of Malawi acting president Betha Bangara Jigadza, who says that government needs to work on removing some of the bureaucratic red tapes that are there, the licenses, and of course the hurdles that are there to obtain export licenses and other related documents, which is partly affecting people from exporting as an alternative source of forex in the country.
You saw, I think we are talking about tobacco, earning about $400 million. But fuel alone needs about 1.2 billion a year for us to utilize. That means that we have a large deficit that we need to generate or to bring in to house just the fuel alone. And fuel is just one part that needs forex. So the discussions there were centering on other alternatives. As a country, we should not just rely on tobacco. But then there are some bottlenecks that are there. For example, if someone wants to export, for example, pigeon peas or maybe groundnuts or others, there are bottlenecks in how they can obtain maybe certificates or phytosanitary certificates just to export. So we are talking about finding alternatives to tobacco or some other products which can complement tobacco as a foreign exchange earner. But as a country, we also need to remove these bottlenecks that we are creating for ourselves. We heard there that someone has to drive all the way to Vumbwe Research Station just to obtain that. Isn't there a way that as a country we need to have some structures maybe in Banda, in Lilongwe, in Zuzu, so that if someone wants to export something and they want certification, they should be able to just drive a short distance and obtain that. And on top of that, we also heard about, for example, obtaining an import certificate of the person who is going to maybe purchase whatever you want to export outside. So sometimes people are unable to obtain that certificate in such a way that they cannot send, for example, samples of whether it's tobacco, whether it's groundnuts, whether it's whatever samples they want to send out there so that they can show the buyer that we have these goods. So these are some of the things that as a country, I think we need to sit down and really look. Whenever we're talking about improving the foreign exchange earnings by maybe bringing in other products or other commodities that we can sell, what is it that we are doing to make sure that there is a flow of these food, goods and services out there so that at least we should not inhibit the flow of these goods? Also
at the CEO Roundtable Forum was the National Planning Commission, which gave the progress of the Malawi 10-year first implementation plan. Let's hear from the National Planning Commission.
Our journey, we are now towards the midpoint of implementation of what we call our MIP 1. And currently we are at around $600 per capita. So we have remaining 6 years to meet the target of $1,000. However, our economic growth has been sluggish owing to a number of exogenous shocks, to the extent that at this particular point in time, for us to graduate to a lower middle income economy, we have to accelerate implementation of our MIP1. And we had modeled that if we grow at least 6% per year, we will be able to achieve that target. Now, considering that we have lost in some way in terms of economic growth because of some of the challenges we've had, we ought to now to grow more. So, leader, if we are to meet by 2030, we need to grow by 10.6%. So this is where we really have to look at which particular interventions should we need to accelerate. That's why now the language now are focusing on how do we accelerate implementation of the MIP1. And I have to acknowledge that even though maybe economic growth has been slow, but a lot of things have happened, more particularly this year, where one of the drivers is the pillar of industrialization. You know, we have got 3 wealth creation pillars. We have agriculture, productivity and industrialization, agriculture, productivity and commercialization. Then we have industrialization, and then we have urbanization. Now, we've seen quite a lot happening, especially in the mining sector, where we've seen a number of MDAs being signed, the mining development agreements, and we see some work being started. And one good thing is that once these leaders begin to mine, within 2 or 3 years of mining, we'll be able to accelerate more than possibly what we have lost. So we believe that is also one area that it can generate a quick economic growth. You may also maybe have also held that under industrialization, we also have what we call the socio-economic park, establishment of an industrial park in Kanengo, where government has an agreement with Arise Limited to establish that industrial park. Currently now we have established a company that is going to undertake that investment. So we believe, and much more. Also, we're also getting ground, I think, in terms of the areas of how we would want maybe to do like the mega farming and others. So these are the areas that we believe are going to accelerate among many. So what we are saying is that for the remaining years, you know, government is using an ATM strategy as one way of implementing 3 pillars. So what we are saying that within these pillars, we really need to focus on how do we advance manufacturing. If you're talking agriculture, productivity and commercialization, how do we advance manufacturing? If we're talking about industrialization, how do we advance manufacturing? If that is embedded in that approach, this is where we're focusing on, then we are likely going to achieve. But otherwise, if we don't, then we may achieve later. But we believe that with a positive mindset and that learning from our colleagues from the workshop on wealth creation, we believe, I think, we really have to stand up together and generate this wealth.
Now, away from that, the Malawi and Mozambique have also signed a memorandum of understanding that the 2 countries, or players in the 2 countries, investors in the 2 countries, can effectively make their investments. This happened at a business meeting in Banda, where areas of agriculture, mining, and others were flagged as potential investment areas for the 2 nations. We first of all hear from the Minister of Trade in Mozambique, that's Silvio Augusto Jose Moreno, who is speaking on the collaboration between Malawi and Mozambique, and of course, the opportunities that are there.
Mozambique and Malawi are the same people, and we drive to make sure that there's no more hunger in our countries. We need to produce food, we need to produce all the products that we need in our both countries. So who can do that is the private sector. So we actually took the opportunity to explain that we have land in Mozambique for agriculture. We have all other potentials on minerals, fishery, tourism, and all those opportunities. So Mozambique and Malawi are the same country. So we need to work together, make sure that our economies grow and that our people will no longer have hunger and have a good health, and so on and so on. We just approved a new investment law which is more friendly, and it has a lot of new engagements in terms of the adaptation or adoption of international treaties, and is actually a very good one. And also we are revising now our incentives for foreign investment. But apart from the investment law, we also approved a new labor law, which is very important, especially for the private sector. And this is smoother, and it protects both parties, or not only the employees, but also the employers. And we believe that will be a very good instrument to make sure that the relationship between in the working side will be better.
Well, to something similar to that, the Malawi Bureau of Standards and their Mozambican counterparts, the Mozambican Standards Board, INOC, officials are upbeat that their collaboration will reduce the cost of doing business, facilitate trade, and foster regional integration. Director General for the Malawi Bureau of Standards, Dr. Bernard Tolle, says the exchange visit by their Mozambican counterparts will harmonize the operations between the two standards bodies.
This will facilitate trade in that we will together do a gap analysis and enhance our capacities, learning from each other. We learn how our colleagues in INOC, in Mozambique, are doing it, and they also learn how we are doing it, how we are monitoring imports and exports. And when we do the gap analysis, we will then come up with a mutual recognition arrangement so that our certification marks, our testing results are accepted in Mozambique. Similarly, their certification marks and their testing results are accepted here in Malawi. For us to be able to do that, they need to understand our processes, and we also need to understand their processes so that we make them comparable. This collaboration will also come up with the areas where we need to harmonize our standards so that our standards mirror each other, so that when we are benchmarking, we are benchmarking the products based on similar or related standards.
Well, David Magaya is Director of Meteorology at the Mozambican Standards Board, INOC, who says the harmonization of their operations, certifications, and of course, checking on the standardizations, marks, and testings will then bring trust between the two countries. In fact, he says when a product is tested in Malawi, they will not test it again in Mozambique based on the mutual trust that is there.
Knowing how this infrastructure of meteorology is working, we will exchange experience between the two countries, between the two laboratories of Malawi and Mozambique. So it will help us to know which areas of meteorology we have to share information, we have to share technologies, we have to harmonize documentation that are implemented in meteorology. The same will be implemented on assessment of quality. I mean, the conformity assessment. I know that Malawi is also implementing that as well as Mozambique. So what are being done on this area of conformity assessment in Malawi? Which areas are dealing with it by MBS? So knowing what Malawi is working on that, we will also change experience to know what we can do together to improve how products are being assessed in Malawi and what products are in compulsory or mandatory standards. So we will adopt these standards in Malawi. We will harmonize with Mozambican standards on issues of assessment or conformity assessment. So this will help the two countries to assess. Once the product is assessed in Malawi, we will not do the same in Mozambique, because we will trust on what was done in Malawi. So this is the way we think will facilitate the trade between the two countries, because Malawi or Mozambique are two countries that are importing products. So exchanging these forms of working, I think will facilitate the assessment and it will facilitate trade between us.
Well, Secretary to the Minister of Transport, Madalo Nyambose, described the exchange visit under the World Bank-funded Southern Africa Trade and Connectivity Project, SATSIP, as critical for the economies of the two nations.
We have a project, Southern Africa Trade Connectivity Project, and this is the project that is encompassing a number of activities. As you know, Ministry of Transport facilitates trade, but we just provide the routes. Our colleagues do the trade. So within that, we have an activity under which the Malawi Bureau of Standards and INOC of Mozambique have to collaborate on issues of certification of goods and services between the two countries. Because usually when there's importation, there are processes that happen in Malawi and the same processes are repeated in Mozambique. So this collaboration is actually to allow mutual recognition of the processes and the standards. So being one of the activities that was envisaged under the project, we are excited because it shows progress in the implementation of the project.
24 African countries are converged in Banda, where policymakers, government officials, CSOs and the private sector players are discussing disaster risk financing and insurance in Africa. The African Development Bank has brought together these key stakeholders to discuss on financing in the insurance sector, targeting the agriculture sector and improved disaster risk adaptation. I spoke to the African Development Bank country manager, Macmillan Anyahu, who is saying despite the low insurance penetration in Malawi, there is potential that farmers in Malawi, individuals and communities can tap in the Africa climate risk financing.
The $100 million is not a commitment, it is the amount of resources that we would leverage with the contribution of $23 million that we have made to Malawi. This is, this is like the second or third generation of the financing we're providing to Malawi. As you all are aware, the two previous years, Malawi has received a payout from the Africa Risk Insurance Company. This year, Malawi got $16 million. So for the next phase of the ADRIFI program, the Africa Development Bank is committing $23 million. And so this would cover both flood, drought, and other climate-related disasters. I think the interesting thing about the next phase of the ADRIFI program for Malawi is that we are moving beyond providing sovereign risk insurance to also go into community level and individual level, where farmers would also have insurance, so that when disaster hits, we're not only going to have payout to government, we're also going to have payout at the community level and also individual household levels.
Jacob Mazalale is a principal secretary in the Ministry of Finance responsible for administration. He says it is crucial not only for the government of Malawi, which is already on the sovereign insurance, but also individuals to tap into such kind of insurance to protect their investments, especially agriculture, in the wake of the diverse adverse climatic shocks and climatic conditions. Talk about the cyclones, persistent cyclones, year in, year out. Let's hear from Mazalare.
As we all know, disasters are becoming more prevalent, very frequent, and also increasing in intensity. What this meeting is doing is to invite stakeholders. There are 26 countries, around 26 countries that have come, different experiences, different levels of managing disasters. So this meeting has brought in experts from across Africa and discussing what are people's experience in managing a disaster. especially those induced by climate change, like flooding, like droughts, and other disasters. In Malawi, our strategy to manage disasters has a policy mix. There are several interventions: budget contingent financing, and risk transfer, which is the risk insurance. It has been very helpful. Malawi, we have subscribed to the African Risk Capacity, and this year we actually benefited 11.2 million United States dollars. We drew down after His Excellency the President Dr. Chakwera declared a state of national disaster in Malawi due to the drought that Malawi experienced. As a result of that, Malawi received 11.2 million United States dollars that has been used to support Malawi's response to the drought.
Well, with that interview from Jacob Mazarare, the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Finance responsible for administration, we've come to the end of this edition of Business Now right here on Zodiac. My name is Alex Banda. Until next time, it's goodbye.